Hello, friends. Today we're starting with a story of love and resilience out on the American frontier. It's the journey of Joe, a 28-year-old Apache rancher who built a vast spread with his own two hands, and Kate, the overlooked second daughter of a wealthy landowner. Cast aside by her family for being too plain and too honest, Kate is sent away like a burden, only to discover in Joe the place where she truly belongs. Together, they carve out a life built not on wealth or appearance, but on courage, loyalty, and a love as white as the Arizona scale line. So before you settle in, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know down in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always amazing to see friends joining from all over the world. Now, let's begin the journey together. The desert morning broke pale and wide, the kind of dawn that came with a cool hush before the heat pressed down. From his porch, Joe Tenaya watched the first light spill across the ridges and turn the mesquite trees into long, crooked shadows. His land stretched further than the eye could hold, rolling pasture, the San Pedro River cutting silver through it, corrals dotted with cattle that grace-raised as if the world had never known hardship. Joe was 28, and though still young by some measure, the years had written themselves hard upon him. He carried himself with the gravity of a man who had earned every acre, every head of stock, through grit more than fortune. He was Apache by his mother's blood, Anglo by his father's. But the townsfolk never let him forget which side weighed heavier in their eyes. Still, he had endured their stares, their whispers, and built something solid, a ranch many men envied. Yet no matter how strong the walls of the house he'd raised with his own hands, it was a hollow place at night. Work filled his days, but silence filled his evenings. He had begun to feel more keenly with each passing season that land and cattle could not fill the emptiness a woman's presence might ease. There was one face that lingered whenever his mind wandered, a young woman in Las Cruces 3 years past. He had been standing near a half-built storefront, negotiating for lumber, when a beam slipped loose from the scaffolding above. It fell fast, too fast for anyone to move. A child, an Anglo girl no older than 6, stood frozen beneath it. Joe had tensed, ready to lunge, but another figure reached her first. A young woman, skirts muddied by her haste, threw herself across the child, shouldering the weight, until others rushed in to help. The timber struck her arm and knocked her to the ground. But she held the little girl close, whispering comfort until the danger passed. Joe remembered her not for beauty in the way most men spoke of it, though there was something fine in the line of her jaw and the honesty in her gaze, but for the fierceness that burned in her dark eyes. Her hair had come loose, ribbon dangling. Her dress was torn at the hem. She hadn't cared. In that instant, he saw more courage than in all the well-dressed men who had stood dumbfounded nearby. Later, he learned her name. Kate Beckett, second daughter of Judge Henry Beckett, a man as powerful as the land was wide. Folks called the Beckett family wealthy beyond reckoning, their holdings spreading along the Rio Grande. But people also muttered that the judge's fortune was built on contracts struck in shadows. Neighbors left penniless after signing papers they barely understood. Joe thought often of Kate. He remembered, too, how her family had whisked her away that day, her mother's lips thin with displeasure, her elder sister shaking her head at the state of her dress. Joe had caught one last glimpse as Kate glanced back, her expression carrying both defiance and loneliness. That look had stayed with him like a thorn buried deep. Now, standing on his porch 3 years later, he told himself it was time. That evening, he sat at his desk, its oak surface worn smooth from years of use. By lamplight, he wrote a short letter to Judge Beckett. His words were careful, respectful, but plain. He did not name Kate outright. Instead, He wrote of having once witnessed courage in one of the judge's daughters, of seeking a wife of such character. To show his sincerity, he sent with the letter 10 of his best cattle, fat, well-bred animals, worth more than most men earned in a season. The cattle would speak louder than ink on paper. They would tell the Becketts that Joseph Tenaya was not some drifter clinging to scraps of land, but a rancher of substance, capable of providing. When the drovers set out east with the herd, Joe stood long after the dust settled, hands resting on the rail of his porch. A man did not make such a gesture lightly. The cattle were wealth he could ill afford to part with, yet he felt no regret. What weighed heavier was the not knowing whether the letter would be mocked, torn, or considered. The days that followed stretched long. Joe threw himself into labor, mending fence, doctoring a lame horse, hauling supplies from Benson. But at night, the silence pressed harder, and his thoughts returned again and again to Las Cruces. Did Kate remember him at all? Had she even noticed the Apache man in the crowd that day? Far to the east, the letter arrived at the Beckett household, sealed with dust from its long journey. Judge Henry Beckett read it at the head of the table, his wife Margaret listening close, their eldest daughter Evelyn hovering nearby. An Apache? Evelyn's laugh was quick and sharp, dreaming above his station, no doubt. She tossed her golden hair, confident the proposal must be meant for her. Margaret pursed her lips. Ridiculous. Evelyn will marry into finer circles. But her eyes narrowed at the mention of the 10 cattle. 10 strong animals meant influence, a bargain worth considering. Judge Beckett rubbed his chin. Not Evelyn. The second one. Kate. Too plain to draw suitors, too troublesome with that tongue of hers, always speaking out, spoiling arrangements. Let Tenaya take her. We'll be rid of her and gain 10 head besides. Evelyn smirked, satisfied. Margaret gave a tight nod. The judge folded the letter with finality. The matter was settled. But Kate herself was not called into the room. She would not learn of the arrangement until days later. For now, her fate was being traded like a coin across the family table. Back in Arizona, Joe walked the length of his house, considering what the future might bring. He knew the Becketts would look down on him. New whispers would carry through every settlement between Tucson and Santa Fe. But he also knew the memory of that young woman, the steadiness in her eyes, the courage in her stance, was no passing fancy. It was a truth he could not shake. He stood at his doorway as dusk settled, the sky painted crimson and bald. Somewhere beyond the horizon, wheels were turning. A decision had been made, though he could not yet know it. Fate had a way of twisting paths together, sometimes through kindness, sometimes through cruelty. Joe only hoped the trail he had set upon would lead him not to scorn, but to the woman who had once turned a fleeting moment of danger into a memory strong enough to build a life upon. The Beckett homestead stood broad and polished along the Rio Grande, a mansion of whitewashed stone and wide porches. To strangers passing by, it was a picture of prosperity, horses in the stables, fields tilled neat, and servants moving with brisk obedience. Yet within its walls, truth was far less gracious. At the breakfast table, Kate Beckett sat opposite her sister Evelyn, the golden child of the family. Evelyn's hair gleamed like sunlight, her smile practiced and perfect, every gesture honed to please. Their mother doted on her. Their father paraded her as proof of his legacy. Kate, by contrast, was an afterthought. She was 22 now, yet still carried herself with the quiet reserve of someone used to being overlooked. Her hair was dark, her features plain, her dresses unadorned. She had a habit of speaking when silence would have served her better, a habit that had earned her no shortage of scoldings. More than once she had spoiled her father's dealings. She had called attention when a contract cheated a poor rancher out of his land, or when a banker's numbers failed to balance. She had spoken up at church when she noticed the offering box never matched the tally announced from the pulpit. Each time, Judge Beckett had silenced her with thunder in his voice. Her mother,